Okay, folks, we're going to talk about some cool technology here with Sportsbox Golf. So, sometimes when a golfer has a hard time covering the golf ball or taking a divot, you can use something called the sway gap. So, you can go in here and you can set the different information to what you want. So, when I go over on the right side, so in this case, I have everything loaded on the right side. I'm looking at some different options, right? So here we're looking at chest sway, which overall isn't too bad. The sway gap is going to be the difference, though, between these different lines. So over on the right side of the avatar, you can see that the blue line and the yellow line are not matched up and set up. And all that means is that the chest sway number versus the pelvis sway number, right? We can see the differences here, okay? So we're going to take this golfer. Every time we click on this number, it's going to give us kind of a Rolodex of different zones, okay? And the way you want to look at this is just kind of like a footprint, right? But with this golfer in particular, the challenge is that when they come into impact, obviously they're a left-handed golfer, but when they're coming into impact, a lot of times they're not moving towards the target enough, right? So we want to be more towards the target. And this golfer's upper body, again, this is their chest sway. So at impact position, our goal is to get the chest a little bit more towards, all right? So let's just watch how this plays out, okay? So we're going to watch the avatar, and then you can see the numbers are changing as we're coming into impact position, right? But when she starts down, she has a tendency to stay a little bit more on her trail side. So what we'd like to see is as she's starting down, we're going to really focus on the chest sway number and see if she can get that chest sway number to positive, okay? So you can see she gets it to pretty much at 0, right? But then it stays there, and everything else stays a little bit more behind. So therefore, now she's got to release her hands a little bit, and she can't quite get the same amount of shafting when she starts into impact position. Now, rotation can certainly have an influence on that as well. But, I mean, if you look at her rotation numbers, they're still pretty good. Obviously, she's a younger junior golfer. But the biggest thing when we get to the sway gaps, even at impact position, right, her head's doing what it's supposed to do, but you can see the blue line really never catches the yellow line. So this is a cool way to use sway gap and to really help your golfer improve. So as we've been working on lessons, the goal now is as she starts her downswing, simply put for her, we just say, hey, can we get the blue line a little bit more to the yellow line when you start your downswing? So by doing that, she's able to compress the golf ball better, and it increased her speed. So some really cool technology from Sportsbox that'll help your golf game and help you improve impact position. One other cool thing, obviously, we can go in and we can say, okay, let's go ahead and do more of a tour comparison, right? So you can do different overlays. This is obviously showing some different options with our joint lines, but then we can go in here and we can do reference models. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to choose a model swing in this case. And we'll go ahead and we'll just use a female 6-iron. So she's hitting a 7-iron, but, I can go back in here. Now we can kind of, take some of these out of play. You've got split screen views, so, we can split these up a little bit if we need to with our 3D models and just compare the two, right? And then there's this little link button, so you can unlink them or you can link them depending on what you want to do. But now what we're going to see, so we get everybody to the top, right? So get everybody to the top, and then we'll see, right? See how these lines are chasing each other a little bit better? The blue line's trying to catch the yellow line at the start, right? So you're going to see here the blue line is not trying to catch the yellow line quite as much when she's starting her downswing. And we can get her to lead arm parallel at this point in time, right? And we can see a little bit of difference between the sway gap. So if we go here, obviously sway gap at the top was different, but the chest sway at the start of the downswing between our avatar on the right and our current golfer is about 2.5 inches, which is, a pretty big deal when we're coming into impact position, right? Okay, so here we can see the lead arm and the shaft, right? They come into impact position with a little bit more shaft lean, okay? So the gappage at impact position, so let's look at the gappage, because this will be an interesting one. Okay, so basically hands are at the same position now, okay? So you look at the chest sway of our avatar, right? So the chest is certainly more towards the target line with our tour player swing versus where our amateur was, right? Sway gap at the top, not much of a difference, but we get to sway gap at impact. Well, it's about the same. So they kind of kept, so she kept the relationship pretty good. She's moved it 1.8, and the tour players actually moved it. Let's see, 1.8. So they've both moved it the same amount, but you can just see one is definitely more towards the target. So one could argue, hey, at the top with our sway gap, if we can get less away with our upper body, that could help because the amount of movement could be better. Also, you look at the amount of pelvis sway and how much this player is moving more towards the target, right, as they start their downswing. So we'll bring it back to the top. And then we'll bring our player back to the top. So the amount of pelvis sway, right, is about the same. Then as our player starts their downswing, we'll go to shaft parallel to the ground with, so shaft parallel, about right here. Look at the amount of pelvis sway as they're coming down into the impact position. So, and this is where it gets tricky as an instructor, right? Because it looks like the differentials are pretty good, but you can see there's a little bit more of a difference with what we call the sway gap. So if we look at the difference coming into the top and the impact position, the correlation was the same. But again, these lines are giving us a sense of the difference between the pelvis and the chest sway. So there we are. We see the better player, 4.2 and 2.7. Certainly everything is more towards the target, whereas our amateur, everything is a little bit more away from the target. So again, we're using this to help quantify and give our students better feedback coming into their lessons, right? So you can see how it's easier for the model swinger, the tour player now, to get that lead arm, hand, and shaft relationship in a nice straight line, where for our player, we can see that the lead arm has a tendency to fold a little bit because they haven't gotten more towards the target halfway down in their downswing. So some pretty cool stuff from Sportsbox. We have a lot of great videos and archives with different tour swings that we can watch as well.